0200 hours local time. The sweltering, oppressive night sky above the treacherous waters of the Strait of Hormuz was abruptly torn apart by the deafening roar of jet engines as the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet shifted to its absolute highest state of combat readiness. A shocking, almost insane geopolitical event that defied all global intelligence predictions was unfolding before our eyes in real time. The British Prime Minister, in an uncontrollable fit of political defiance, ordered the Royal Navy's absolute pride, the aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth, to lead a heavily armed carrier strike group straight into a strictly enforced U.S. designated military exclusion zone off the coast of Oman. The goal is clear. Use raw military force to send a strong, uncompromising message to the U.S. that Washington's hesitation to secure the world's most vital oil shipping lanes has become far too passive and entirely unacceptable for a Europe facing an energy crisis. The U.S., operating under an uncompromising administration's tough new directives, is certainly not going to sit idly by and allow itself to be threatened in its own operational theater. As soon as the CENTCOM early warning radar system detected the British fleet's aggressive, unmasked signal, the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet, spearheaded by the nuclear-powered supercarrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, immediately went on general quarters. Warships surged forward, racing to intercept the British fleet with a massive, terrifying show of force that threatened to spark a Western Civil War. But immediately after the Pentagon's seemingly arrogant press statement dismissing the European threat, a surprise occurred that even the most imaginative and paranoid commanders in Tehran could not have anticipated. Instead of celebrating the fracture of the Western Alliance, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC High Command had to sound a frantic red alert across their entire hardened coastal defense network. The Gulf of Oman was literally churning into a frothing cauldron of white water as the HMS Queen Elizabeth Carrier Strike Group openly entered the narrow, congested shipping lanes with an unprecedented, almost reckless level of nautical aggression. U.S. electronic surveillance operators sitting in darkened combat information centers watched in utter disbelief as the British fleet made absolutely no attempt to conceal its massive battle formation. Instead, they were operating their towering Samson Active Electronically Scanned Array, AESA, radars at maximum, unrestricted power, continuously and provocatively painting U.S. defense positions with targeting lasers and electromagnetic radiation. The engines of British F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters roared like thunder in the pitch-black sky, dropping their altitudes to perform dangerous deck-rattling flybys right across the bows of fully armed U.S. Aegis destroyers. In response to this brazen, unprecedented British maneuver, Washington's reaction was cold, immediate, and technologically ruthless. The Pentagon's public statement that European ships could not dictate American operational terms was not just political rhetoric. It was a direct, highly classified combat execution order transmitted directly to U.S. CENTCOM. Immediately, the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet deployed an impenetrable, overlapping, encircling formation centered entirely on the towering island of the USS Eisenhower. From the busy, chaotic flight deck of the American supercarrier, a full squadron of EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft was catapulted into the night sky simultaneously, their afterburners lighting up the darkness. Carrying the latest highly classified generation of ALQ-249 next-generation jammer pods, they instantly created a massive, invisible electromagnetic jamming screen covering the entire operational grid of the British fleet. In a fraction of a second, the entire electromagnetic spectrum in the Strait of Hormuz region was violently and intentionally burned out. The U.S. activated a devastating noise barrage mode, bombarding all commercial maritime and military communication lines, as well as localized radar frequencies with blinding, overpowering white noise. The glowing screens of Iranian coastal surveillance stations in Bandar Abbas, as well as neutral monitoring outposts, were immediately blanked out, filled with nothing but static. while all secure satellite uplinks were severed without warning. The United States was actively turning this highly volatile, globally critical choke point into a total information black hole, where absolutely no one could see, hear, or transmit anything without explicit encrypted permission from the Pentagon. Underwater. The situation was even more chaotic, claustrophobic, and terrifying. Both the United States and the United Kingdom simultaneously activated their high-powered active sonar arrays, creating a literal hellish acoustic environment beneath the crashing waves. The powerful low-frequency sound waves collided violently with the shallow, rocky, and unpredictable underwater topography of the Persian Gulf, bouncing off thermal layers and creating millions of confusing, overlapping false echoes that deafened passive listening devices. However, this specific, overwhelming acoustic chaos was exactly the environmental condition that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy had been patiently waiting for over a decade to deploy its ultimate asymmetric trump card. Taking full advantage of the Western allies' chaotic, noisy, and seemingly distracted activity on the surface, the Iranian Supreme Naval Commander authorized the immediate launch of their deep-sea assassins. The highly classified, domestically produced Fateh-class stealth midget submarines slipped quietly from their hidden, heavily fortified subterranean coastal grottos and plunged deep into the murky, chaotic waters of the Strait. Covered in advanced anechoic sonar-absorbing tiles and powered by ultra-quiet diesel-electric engines running purely on battery power, these vessels are feared by regional intelligence as the ghosts of the Gulf. They carried a lethal payload of advanced, wake-homing Valfodger heavy torpedoes and smart bottom mines equipped with magnetic and acoustic triggers, fully capable of completely paralyzing the global oil trade by sinking a supertanker in the main channel in under 5 minutes. Iran's tactical plan was exceptionally sophisticated and incredibly daring. Use the chaotic, deafening noise generated by the fierce US-UK naval confrontation as the perfect, impenetrable acoustic camouflage to slip through the narrowest, most heavily guarded part of the strait entirely undetected, laying a silent minefield that would hold the Western world's economy hostage. At exactly 400 hours, Iranian stealth reconnaissance drones flying high above the maritime cloud cover, operating on secure line-of-sight data links, reported back to the underground command bunkers in Tehran that their submarine formation was moving flawlessly. The sub-commanders were brilliantly utilizing the massive cavitation noise from the British aircraft carrier's giant bronze propellers to perfectly conceal the faint high-frequency hum of their own electric drive motors. The highly confident Iranian submarine captain, sensing a historic, career-defining victory over the Great Satan, ordered an immediate increase in speed to 12 knots. In the shallow, treacherous waters of the Strait, 12 knots for a midget submarine is a reckless, battery-draining speed that significantly increases the risk of cavitation. But the captain deemed it absolutely necessary to get through the heavily monitored choke point before the Western powers miraculously resolved their diplomatic dispute. He sat in his dimly lit combat center, genuinely believing he was in the process of pulling off the geopolitical con of the century, making the world's most advanced, multi-billion-dollar navies look like absolute fools right on their own heavily militarized turf. But in his arrogance, he had just made a fatal, irreversible tactical mistake. The chaotic, overwhelming surface noise they were so heavily relying on to hide their stealthy approach was not a byproduct of a Western Civil War. It was actually a carefully composed, perfectly orchestrated death knell designed specifically and exclusively for them. At exactly 0430 hours, the entire battlefield situation changed so rapidly and violently that Iranian electronic warfare officers staring intently at their submerged consoles were completely unable to comprehend, let alone react to, the shift. On the highly secure, encrypted Link 16 tactical data link system, the British fleet's seemingly rogue, aggressive broadcast frequency suddenly and seamlessly synchronized completely with the U.S. Navy's Naval Integrated Fire Control System. In reality, there was absolutely no diplomatic fallout between Washington and London. All that grandiose, terrifying military deployment, the aggressive posturing, and the media panic was just a carefully orchestrated, multi-billion-dollar grand theatrical drama with a single deadly operational purpose: to lure the heavily guarded, deeply entrenched Iranian stealth submarine fleet out of its impenetrable coastal bunkers and into the open water where they could be hunted. The British fleet's noisy, arrogant movement and frenzied active sonar emissions were actually a massive funneling trap, forcing the Iranian submarines to dive deeper and desperately search for the few rare, quiet acoustic corridors in the seabed to hide their acoustic signatures. But Iran's Supreme Naval Command did not expect and could not have known that these specific quiet corridors were actually pre-calculated, digitally mapped death traps that the United States and the United Kingdom had meticulously set up weeks in advance of this operation. The international press had previously reported that the UK had sent only a dozen elite combat specialists ahead of the main fleet for routine logistical coordination and embassy security. But in the cold, harsh reality of modern special operations, these 12 solitary, heavily armed soldiers were the absolute most dangerous weapons of the entire multinational campaign. They were an elite special boat service, SBS, team specializing exclusively in underwater acoustic warfare and covert surveillance, secretly dropped in the dead of night by heavily modified American stealth helicopters onto barren, unforgiving rocky outcrops directly along the Iranian ship's only viable escape route. Working in total silence under the cover of darkness, utilizing closed-circuit rebreathers that left absolutely no bubbles, these 12 soldiers deployed advanced autonomous underwater drones and dropped heavily weighted arrays of high-sensitivity passive hydrophones deep through the thermal layers of the water column. When the overconfident Iranian submarines accelerated to 12 knots, the sound of their electric propulsion, though virtually silent to normal surface ships, echoed like a booming rhythmic thunderstorm in the high-tech, digitally enhanced ears of the British acoustic experts monitoring the feeds from the rocks above. The exact, real-time GPS coordinates, depth, and heading of the Iranian stealth subs were instantly relayed via heavily encrypted microburst satellite transmission directly to the Naval Operations Center of the Fifth Fleet. The moment of absolute devastating punishment came precisely at 0500 hours. 3 massive, heavily armed U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers simultaneously turned their bows in perfect, terrifying unison. They aimed their massive hull-mounted active sonar transducers directly at the thin steel hulls of the Iranian submarines at extremely close range, and activated their active ping mode at maximum unrestricted weaponized power. In the shallow, highly sound-conducting aquatic environment of the Persian Gulf, this focused, relentless acoustic attack created tremendous, crushing physical pressure in the water. The concentrated high-decibel sound waves hit the Iranian submarines with a blinding physical intensity, creating violent, tearing resonance that threatened to rip the pressure hulls apart. Inside the cramped, claustrophobic Fateh-class subs, pure, unadulterated hell broke loose. Iranian sailors clutched their heads in agonizing, screaming pain as their eardrums were brutally assaulted by the piercing, inescapable 240 decibel sound, while their vital navigation consoles, targeting computers and combat sensors literally smoked, sparked, and burned out completely due to massive input signal overload. Unable to withstand the brutal, agonizing physical torture and the profound psychological terror of being completely blind, deaf, and paralyzed underwater, the Iranian sea ghosts were violently forced to perform the absolute most humiliating maneuver a submariner can ever execute: the emergency blow surfacing procedure. High-pressure air flooded their ballast tanks, violently expelling the seawater, and the black, rubber-coated hulls breached the surface in a massive eruption of white foam. They lay dead in the water, completely exposing themselves to the high-resolution infrared lenses of circling Western P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft and MQ-9 Reaper drones, openly admitting their complete, undeniable tactical failure to the watching world. all highly classified telemetry and data on their unique acoustic signature. The absolute most vital, closely guarded secret of the Iranian Fateh-class submarine program was completely, flawlessly, and permanently recorded by the hidden sensor network of those 12 British commandos. From this exact moment forward, Iran's most fearsome, multi-billion-dollar asymmetric naval weapon was permanently neutralized, rendered completely useless for future stealth operations. And the final crushing geopolitical twist left the Ayatollahs and IRGC generals completely speechless when the ultimate embarrassing truth about the massive British fleet was finally revealed to the global public. After the joint operation successfully concluded and the massive electromagnetic jamming was lifted, raw satellite data revealed a shocking reality. There was no HMS Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier in the Gulf of Oman at all. The massive, intimidating radar-blotting fleet that Iran saw on its coastal screens was actually an incredibly sophisticated next-generation electronic illusion. It was generated by the U.S. Navy's highly classified Nemesis system, utilizing advanced radar reflectors attached to small, disposable, unmanned surface vessels, combined with synchronized, deep-level cyber attacks injected directly into Iranian early warning infrastructure. The United Kingdom's only real physical fighting force in the entire Middle Eastern theater that night was 12 cold, wet soldiers sitting on a jagged rock. Iran had mobilized its most valuable, heavily guarded strategic assets, preparing for the naval battle of the century, only to face a digital phantom and be utterly, humiliatingly defeated by a dozen men with laptops and hydrophones. The United States and its allies won decisively, permanently keeping the Strait of Hormuz open for global trade and completely disarming Iran's stealth fleet without firing a single lethal bullet. The campaign ended as the crippled, electronically blinded Iranian submarines silently limped back to their home ports under the mocking, watchful cameras of American drones, carrying with them the crushing humiliation and deep, abiding fear of an invisible, highly calculating superpower they could not ever hope to outsmart or resist.